In this episode, a 4-month health check of my daily driver 1975 XJ6 after the partial rebuild. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put new videos every week on some Jaguar and classic car related content, and today we're going to have a look at my daily driver. If you're not aware, I daily drive a 1975 XJ6, which I partially restored on this channel during the winter and spring. I bought it around Christmas with a blown head gasket, and everything else seemed pretty much fine. So I attempted just a home style rebuild on a very tight budget to get this thing back on the road. So had the engine apart partially, did the head gasket, lapped the valves at home. There's a whole playlist with me doing all of this if you want to check that out. I'll put a link to it up above and down below. But all in all, this cost around $500 to get this thing back on the road. And of course it was a little bit of a gamble, but I got the car very cheaply, and it was just a fun gamble to see if I can get this thing back on the road really inexpensively and really cheaply. And it seems to have worked. I've driven it now pretty much every single day for 4 months, and it's been dead reliable. It's been working perfectly all the time, even when it's been really hot. It hasn't gotten hot at all. It always stays the temperature. It doesn't seem to use any coolant. So it seems like it's fixed and it's working well. It's on the road. However, of course, there are a few small niggles that we're having a look at. I sometimes have a slight misfire when it's really hot outside and I've been for a long drive and it comes back and idles. It can sometimes misfire just a tiny bit, but a lot of my ignition components are really old, so that's one thing that I'm going to change in this video. Again, I have a new cap, rotor, and some nice new ignition cables, so we're going to fit those in the end. But the main part of this video is let's just do a compression check on this engine. Nothing complicated. Just seeing, is the compression pretty much even on the engine? Because if it's not, there's no point in throwing new parts on it if the misfire is due to it being low compression in one cylinder or something. But I don't think that's the case, because every other time it runs really nice and really smooth. It's only every now and then it has this little misfire, so I don't think it's a compression issue. But let's head over to the car outside and check the compression, and hopefully it's all really nice and even. If it's not, then we'll see what the next step is. Maybe it'll be just keep driving it, see what happens, look for a different engine, I don't know. But let's just go out and have a look at that compression. And here we are out of the car. Like I mentioned, this is my daily driver, so it's not a perfect clean engine bay. I mean, it's a little dirty and dusty, but this car gets driven every day, gets used, that's what happened. I already prepared a few things, so I removed the distributor cap, the old one, and the old leads. It isn't terrible, but there's definitely, some type of oxidation and stuff on there, and the rotor we'll take out later, but that's not, definitely not brand new, so that should help, hopefully. And these leads look really old and terrible, so that's a good thing to change those out before the winter, at least before the fall when it gets really sort of foggy and moist outside. You don't want any condensation arcing anything out. Other than that, I just loosen up all of the spark plugs a little bit so I can take them out now. So we're going to have a look at those, see how it's running, and then we'll do a compression check, and hopefully everything is nice and even and we don't find any odd cylinders. Here are all the spark plugs laid out, and the good thing is that all of them look really even. They'll look like they've been burning evenly, so I don't see a really oily cylinder or a really black cylinder. This one looked a little darker when it came out, but on the other side looks pretty much perfect, just like the other ones. You may have noticed a little bit of redness to some of them, and that's an indication that you have some type of usually fuel additive in the fuel. And I have been running an additive because I got a little bit of moisture, got a little bit of water in one of the fuel tanks when that sit out all weekend when it was raining, and my tank seal wasn't really sealing properly. There was some dirt in there, and I wasn't sure, but I thought I got some water in the tank, so I just used an additive to get rid of that water, which will burn in the engine. And that's probably what I'm seeing on here, because that was just on the last fill up, so that's probably why. And now I'm going to set up the camera, we'll do a quick compression check and see how healthy this engine is. I've hooked up the compression tester in cylinder 1. I have disconnected the fuel pump. I have disconnected the ignition as well. And I'm going to crank it over in the car. I put my foot flat to the floor just to get the most airflow through the engine. And then we'll see what the compression levels are on each cylinder. And hopefully they're all pretty even. Cylinder 1 is at 155. Cylinder 2 is at 140. And cylinder 3 is at 149, 150, so let's put 150. Cylinder 4 is, that's pretty much 160. Cylinder 5 is 155. Alright, last but not least, cylinder 6. And if you're seeing some weird drops and stuff around there, it's just because a few weeks ago or a week or two ago I was using this compression tester to try and get that S-type V8 going. So there's still some residue left of ATF in it. I'm trying to drain it out, but whenever I hit the button to decompress it, I do spray a little bit of ATF everywhere. So I will be cleaning that off afterwards. And cylinder 6 a little bit lower at 130. I'm actually going to retry that one more time, just maybe I didn't get the tester in there perfectly. Oh yeah, the same 130, so that one is just a little bit lower than the other ones. But I'm gonna put them all down and we'll see how much difference there is. And we'll do that inside, but before we go inside, I'm gonna put all the plugs back in, put on the new cables and the new cap and new rotor, and let's see how it runs. We have some nice new ignition components here. This is a Series 2 car, but it has a Series 3 engine just with Series 2 carbs on it. So I do have the Series 3 ignition system. So I got all original Series 3 ignition components. Let's just see if we can see a difference, and they look pretty much exactly the same. I did clean this one off with a sandpaper when I rebuilt the engine and put it back together. So I will be keeping this as a good spare because there's nothing wrong with it. But it's good to have a new one. A little bit of a tight fit. Let's see if it, there we go, on the way to the bottom. Here's the new cap. Let's see how nice and clean it is inside. So that's the cap, which I think is pretty much the worst, the cap and the cables. You can see the oxidation levels in there. Did scrape up off a bit of it when I rebuilt the engine, but the new one's definitely way better. So let's put that in place. And now onto the ignition cables. Open this up. And they all look very nice and soft. The nice thing is they're already labeled, so let's try and unravel them. And this end, of course, goes onto the spark plugs. We got, let's see, let's find the longest one first, number 1. Clicks on really nicely. So I will fit all of these now to spark plugs, then I'll pull them down to the distributor, and I'm just going to copy the firing order from the old distributor. It's just the easiest way of getting it right. And then let's just see if this thing fires up. Maybe it'll even run a little smoother. All of that is in place now, and I really liked how well they clicked in place. I felt like they got good connection everywhere. Here as well. The old ones I had went out 90 degrees, and they kind of just made a mess down here. I like that these are straight on. It just looks a lot neater and cleaner down here. And I'm a big fan of just, you know, having nice clean cables so you can follow it. And I like that they're labeled down there, so it's not up here. It's just, here it's obvious which cylinder is which, but it's nice to have it labeled down there. And in case you're wondering, the firing order is 153624 on an XK engine. But if you have the old cap, you can just, you know, copy it over. But in case you don't, or you get lost or you mess up, it is 153624. So now let's crank it over and see if it starts, and maybe it's even a little bit smoother. Probably have to let it warm up for a bit because it's kind of warm today, so The choke is usually a little bit half on then, and it's a little uneven in the beginning, but then after a few minutes the other choke turns off and it's usually really nice and smooth. But let's see how it starts up. Alright, I already think that is already a little bit smoother. It's not really that smooth until the choke is perfectly off, when it's a little half off like this, but it already feels a bit smoother. Okay, let's listen to it back here a bit. I mean, it's surging a tiny bit. This is because the choke is turning off, but sounds pretty good. I'm just gonna let it warm up here for a couple minutes, so I'll maybe go for a quick little drive, and then I'll turn the camera back on and let's see if it's running nice and smoothly. I'm back from a quick test drive now, and it's up to operating temperature and it seems to be running really nicely. Fortunately today it's not one of those days where it would have a lot of issues, but I do feel it is running nicer than before. It's definitely really nice and smooth and has really good throttle response, and I think before it would sort of misfire sometimes a little bit right before 2000 RPM there, but now it's really nice and smooth. Let's have a listen at the exhaust. And that sounds really nice as well. Okay, so back in the workshop after that little health check, and I'd say it passes. There are a few issues we're going to go on to. It doesn't have perfect compression. But let's just start with saying it's not a perfect car. It got put back on the road on a budget. I have no idea how many miles are on the engine really. I have no idea if it's been rebuilt. I don't really know anything more about it than that when I had it apart, the liners inside, like the honing, still looked pretty alright. I didn't see any big scratches. I left some fluid in the cylinders and it didn't go past the rings. I had some ATF at that time. And I know that I just relapped the valves myself at home, set the valve clearance and all of that, and has a new head gasket. No, it doesn't really use any oil, and I know it doesn't use any coolant, and it stays cool and it runs nice and smoothly and accelerates all the way through the rev range. That's all I really know, and for a daily driver that I just drive around, that's really good enough for me. But let's go back to the compression levels. So cylinder 1 was 155, cylinder 2 was 140, cylinder 3 was 150, cylinder 4 was 160, cylinder 5 was 155, and cylinder 6 was 130. So those of you keeping track at home, you can see that the percent difference between all of those is 20%. And that is too high, really. They say that no more than 10% difference between cylinders on a good, healthy engine. If I remove cylinder 6 from that, I get about 13%. On the other ones, that's not really perfect as well. However, this is a 30-something plus year old engine that I don't really know anything about, and it runs smooth enough. And the not perfect compression could be the reason for it. That sometimes, or not sometimes, but has a little bit of a shaky idle before it warms up. It could be that the carburetor seems to be working well. Everything else seems to be working well. All the spark plugs look nice and even, so none of them are burning oil or anything, so I'm really happy about that. So in conclusion, yeah, I'm pretty much going to keep on driving it as it is. There's no point in doing anything else. There's one more thing I would like to check. Sometimes it feels like the oil pressure gauge is showing a little bit low pressure. Not that it's dangerously low, but I do think the engine has more pressure than that. So I want to hook up just a manual gauge and see if it's the sender or the gauge or something in the car that's wrong, because it feels like it has really good strong oil pressure. Also because if you crank it over right now, when I was cranking it over, the gauge shot up really quickly. So it builds oil pressure really quickly. So it feels like a good healthy engine. Otherwise, even though the compression levels aren't perfect, otherwise I'd say a pretty good XK engine should be somewhere around 150 psi and up, somewhere around that. So that it's hovering around 140, 150 psi, I'm really happy with that, especially with the so-called budget rebuild. And now with the new ignition components, at least that part is pretty much ready to go into the winter. The coil is new from the rebuild, so now everything in that system is new and should be reliable. It's been reliable so far. I have thought about doing a new series, which is basically getting this car ready for the winter, because I will be using it in the fall and the winter as my daily driver. So if you want to see that series, let me know down below. It would be several episodes long, like a series, just like the series I did when I put this thing back on the road and rebuilt the engine. But of course a different topic, more preparing it for being used in winter. So if you want to see that, please let me know in the comments down below. And you might still see the XJS behind me there. Part 2 of the coolant hoses will be coming out on Thursday. I was just tightening up some of the last things, and a few of the clamps didn't really feel like they were tightening well, and I don't have any more clamps left in that size. So next time I'm at the auto parts store, I'm going to just pick up some new hose clamps. I'm not going to go just to pick those up. But next time I'm there, I'll do that next few days, and I'll finish up all the hoses, finish up that video, and it should be up on Thursday. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a lot. And until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.